Excuse me. The first row is still free.
Yes, absolutely.
Special speakers.
No, that's all you. Thanks for asking, though. Yeah. Yeah, no, perfect.
I think for now I probably.
Hey everybody, a little bit louder. 154, 154. 154, 154. Thank you. I just wanted to give everyone about a 10-minute warning. We're going to get started in the next 10 minutes here as we let people filter in. If this is your first time here in UX, my name is Chris Marchano. I'm one of the partners here at Neuron. We are a UX design and creative agency based here in downtown San Francisco. So please, if you haven't already, grab some pizza. There's cheese, pepperoni, and a nice pesto one, as well as, of course, beer. This is beer and UX, but we're going to get started in the next 10 minutes if you want to start grabbing a seat and getting quiet too. Thanks for coming out, everyone.
Thanks, Frank.
Just say hello to everybody online.
I am.
Okay.
I want to touch it.
Coming off, huh? Just go up and put it on.
Okay, everyone. I think that was more than 10 minutes. You can just press pause on the laptop, Michelle. Okay, well, I said it once, I'll say it again for those of you who just showed up. Welcome to the first in-person edition of Beer and UX since pre-pandemic times. So, big round of applause to everyone for coming out. And I see lots of new faces, had a chance to connect a little bit. Of course, after the event this evening, there'll still be plenty of time for networking and what pizza is left. But today holds a special place in my heart because it's an annual tradition. My colleague Matt, he's the creative director at Neuron, and he'll be going through an extensive deck into top 10 trends of really UX and the broader tech ecosystem as a whole. So this is something we do every year. No need to take notes, although I do see some note takers, A+ for you. Matt will be re-recording after this event as a screen sharing, as a nice little artifact for you all. But I hope you get a lot out of this. And it's running about 60 to 70 minutes length, and then there'll be ample time for Q&A, and I'll be buzzing around with the microphone. So without further ado, welcome to Beer and UX, hosted by Neuron.
Hey everyone. It's been over 3 years since I've had to give one of these talks in person. So can we just see if anyone in the back is having trouble hearing? Is everyone okay? Is the volume good? A little louder? Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, like Chris said, my name is Matt Stoner. I'm the creative director as well as a co-founder here at Neuron. I've had the pleasure of working on and leading dozens of UX UI design projects over the last 6 years that we've been in business, and I've had a chance to work on some amazing things with our brilliant and talented design team. So about 4 years ago, I started giving these trends talks, and I think we skipped 1 year during the pandemic, but for good reason. There was a lot going on in the world, so hopefully we get a pass there. But we're back in person, and it's great to have you all out tonight. So a little bit about Neuron. We are a UX UI design, product design consultancy based here in San Francisco. The majority of our projects are around B2B and enterprise software solutions, but we do take on mission critical interfaces like radar and marine navigation, or telling a unique story through a marketing website, and even consumer-facing mobile applications. So with that, having done that intro, we'll jump into our talk on trends. So in the past, when I discussed trends, it was more around the nuances of visual design interactions, various design patterns, and I related it to evolution or natural selection in how these trends make their way into the market. But today's talk is going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about sort of larger market forces and things that are driving the products that we use every day. So in the past, you might ask, like, why do we need to look at trends? Shouldn't we be trying to make really new, innovative things that break the mold? But in order to answer that, let's look at a couple things that happened in the last year or two. So we're starting to see more mature use cases for blockchain technology, like in logistics and supply chain visibility. There's been a lot of hype around the metaverse and the race to build it in the last year since Meta gave their keynote on it. There's a lot of investment dollars behind that as well. We've been caught up in the mania of NFTs, and one sold for $69 million in 2021. We've also seen online communities and spaces like Discord see record growth during the pandemic. Apple's new privacy bombshell, where they limit the application's ability to track you, is causing a ripple effect through many industries. And we saw a lot of workspace applications try to sort of scramble to incorporate different ways that people can collaborate and integrate that into their product, like around meetings, chat, etc., trying to drive that. So through the pandemic, we saw a lot of what I call like reactionary solutions, things that solve short-term needs, like bringing things from the physical world into the digital space. Like we saw that with museums, or in my last Trends talk, I talked about Hulu, who did like a Halloween haunted house experience. Now we're going to be talking about like the continued need and use of these validated solutions, and sort of what's going to be more prominent moving forward. So with that, the first trend we'll look at is Web 3.0. So Web 1.0, we all know, is basically just getting information onto the internet. It was very basic HTML websites. Web 2.0 was more about connectivity, like social connectivity, user-generated content, more interactivity, and that really was empowered by mobile devices and the ability to start streaming video in real time. Now that as we move into Web 3.0, it's more about openness, decentralization, and greater utility for users. users. So we're going to look at blockchain, decentralized apps, the metaverse, and the economics behind it. So a blockchain is a distributed database. It's basically a ledger among the nodes of a computer network, and it helps generate trust without a trusted third party. So what in the past we've seen a lot of conversations around blockchain and how it's used with cryptocurrencies in order to facilitate transactions and keep track of those transactions. And with that came Bitcoin with the blockchain of the same name. This was one of the earliest and most successful cryptocurrencies that we've seen. To date, a lot of the blockchain use cases were centered around cryptocurrency, but now we're seeing more, like I mentioned before, mature use cases like Maersk, who uses it to track and understand their supply chain and digital goods. Also, we've seen this application called Votes, which allows for secure mobile voting from anywhere across the globe. We've seen it in municipal, midterms, and Senate races across the United States. And I believe it was a fairly successful trial. So we're going to talk about decentralized applications now. So essentially, this is an open source app that runs on a peer-to-peer blockchain. Now, this is free from the control of a single authority. In centralized applications, the company behind that application controls the information, it controls your information. And there's a movement to create more decentralized platforms. So kind of regardless of the ethics behind it, some of the use cases here are like open source social media dedicated to internet freedom, where you can essentially say anything you want. And there's no moderation from apps like that an app like Facebook would do. Obviously, that presents some dangers and almost harkens back to the Wild West when we were in Web 1.0. But there does seem to be some demand out there for this. And we're seeing various sort of the underlying technologies to help realize people's vision of decentralized applications, like Smart Chain IO. They're able to help regular businesses understand and implement smart contracts, or platforms like Ceramic, which acts as a decentralized database that any application can be built upon. And the education around the DeFi space and decentralized applications is growing and growing. And so, sort of at the same time as Web 3.0 is coming up in conversations, we're now faced with the reality that the metaverse could be a thing. So essentially, it's a simulated digital environment. It uses AR and VR technologies, and it tries to mimic the interactions that we're all having in the real world, but in virtual space. One of the more successful implementations of this so far is coming from Epic Games. In their game Fortnite, we've seen them create this Soundwave series with different notable artists, where they would have this character within this virtual world, and then players could come in, attend the event, listen to the music, hang out with each other, and collect various coins throughout the game, like an in-app currency that they could then use in the game itself. And what's kind of driving this and why it might be the right time for the metaverse to actually come to life is things like Unreal Engine. So the engines that are driving the rendering and ray tracing technology that enables the virtual world to look almost seamless with the real world. Unreal Engine 5 is a really interesting project by Epic Games, and they're really beefing up the realism involved in these environments using multiple forms of ray tracing. And at the same time as internet speeds continue to improve, we're able to deliver these kinds of experiences in real time with very few glitches. So what most people think is the closest iteration of the metaverse right now is being driven by Meta. One of their products is Horizon Worlds, which I believe you access via their Oculus device. And it's basically a video game, but it also is a platform that enables you to build games on top of it. And if anyone watched the keynote, their Meta's vision is that we'll all be meeting in the metaverse, hanging out with friends in the metaverse, and doing a lot of the things that we do in our personal lives and work in one of these environments. Another interesting point is that if Meta is kind of successful in driving growth in this space, they could implement their own currency, they could have a marketplace selling digital goods, they could essentially create the new ecosystem that they've been forced out of with functioning on top of other platforms like Apple and Google. So there's a lot of money behind this idea right now. There's a lot of hype since the keynote. On Sand Hill Road, there's a lot of conversations around the metaverse and a lot of interesting projects coming out. But to me, it's still not clear whether or not this is going to be the right time. We certainly see a lot of factors lining up to allow it to be the right time. But if people don't actually see a need in this technology or want to use this technology, it'll be interesting to see if it's a success. The way the big players are thinking about things right now is that it's basically a race for who can build the biggest and best metaverse, attract the most users as quickly as possible, and try to become that leader in the space and the metaverse where everyone wants to hang out and work and build their applications on top of. But inevitably, there's some problems with that. If I have an account in one metaverse and I have digital goods in that metaverse, I have my cryptocurrency, how will that translate from one metaverse to another? It's unlikely that it's going to go in the direction that just one metaverse will rule them all, but it's more likely that we'll have a scattering of experiences, and people will want a way to kind of navigate between those, right? And that's where sort of the economics comes into play. So it needs to be able to support the transaction, exchange, and ownership experience inside of it. And there are several technologies right now that are already enabling that to happen. Ethereum was seemingly created for this use case, and a lot of the current metaverse products are functioning on the Ethereum blockchain. It also is one of the most popular cryptocurrencies and is very closely connected to the NFT ownership experience. Most NFTs are using the Ethereum blockchain right now. So anyone who's been paying attention during the last 6 months to a year has understood this kind of hype around the NFT. And we've seen a lot of interesting stories coming out, a lot of expensive sales of NFTs, a lot of conversations of, are these things really worth it? Is it a Ponzi scheme? I'm curious to know amongst the crowd, does anyone own or ever owned an NFT? Okay. Interesting. Well, one of the earliest NFT projects was called CryptoPunks, and this is a very early use case that doesn't even begin to explore the possibilities of what an NFT could mean or represent. These are basically PNGs that live on a server. You get a unique code identifying that you're the owner of that, but essentially it's just a small piece of digital artwork. The most expensive of these CryptoPunks sold for $23.7 million, just for reference. There was a Picasso that sold this year that was owned by Sean Connery for $22 million. So the oldest NFT that you can trade on a platform called OpenSea, which is one of the more prominent sites for purchasing NFTs, is the Pixel Map. You can basically purchase one of these pixels, you own the NFT for that pixel, and you can display whatever you want in that space. But someone else had this brilliant idea about 17 years ago. He created a 1,000 by 1,000 pixel website and then sold them all for $1 each. He made $1 million and funded his education and then some. But at the end of the day, you don't have that unique sense of ownership. This is the Beeple example that I referenced before, and I'm really excited that artists are kind of having their moment in the sun and really being able to monetize their work digitally. There's a lot of instances of fraud running across that community. People get their art ripped off all the time or their photos ripped off all the time. So proving that ownership and selling it for large quantities of money is really exciting. But I think we've kind of experienced this mania around NFTs, and we started to speculate that it may be in a bubble when this piece sold for $69 million. And if housing in the real world wasn't expensive enough, now you might have to compete for virtual real estate. In different metaverse products like the Sandbox, the use of the blockchain, NFTs, and cryptocurrency allows this economic model to function where you can purchase physical finite land in these environments. And these companies, a lot of companies and corporations are buying up the land and building their own properties on it for the use of advertising. My college actually built their own campus in a product called Second Life, which was a really early iteration of the metaverse. It launched back in 2003, and some poor soul had to build out the entire college experience, and they even had a little ticker that connected to the university communication. So we've seen these ideas being tested in the past, and we're just not sure if now is the time for the metaverse to actually realize its full potential. But in the Web 3.0 space, there's some really interesting concepts around gaming. This product called Axie Infinity is an interesting use case that combines cryptocurrencies and NFTs. You can collect, raise, and train these little monsters, kind of like Pokemon, but each of them is their own NFT, and you have to purchase 3 of them just to get access to the game. But once you've done so, you can pit them against one another. You can earn cryptocurrency for different battles that you go into. You can exchange and trade them. You can breed super Axies and start to trade them and earn money on the platform. And it's really interesting, and it benefits both parties because once you pay that upfront fee, you can start monetizing your experience of playing the game, and it also helps to drive the growth of the game itself. And while cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically have started to become more institutionalized, it still feels like the Wild West, and there are a lot of cyber crimes and lack of regulation in this space. It's really difficult to crack down on this kind of thing because the border of jurisdictions becomes really difficult. And also the fluctuating volatility of cryptocurrency is also alarming. It's clear this year and last year that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are not really immune from the fluctuations of the broader indexes. That was the longest section, I swear. The next one we'll talk about is digital community. So in digital community, we're talking about creating and owning a community online, being able to personalize that to really make it your own. This is something that has continued to grow throughout the pandemic. I alluded to that in the intro with applications like Discord. So Discord came out of initially a gaming use case. It was a place where people could come, talk about their games, chat over voice, even play games. And it allows people to create their own servers, invite the people that they played with or now just know and want to hang out with and talk to, and have these personalized environments. To me, it's the next evolution of social media. Social media's intention was to connect us and get us communicating with one another, but it's become such a beast, and creating your own servers and hanging out with your friends is becoming a much more interesting and growing use case. So Discord servers can be organized by topics. You can chat in any of these. You can have different topics within that server. And you can assign roles to various people, so different levels of responsibility and ownership over the space and its moderation. And they have a really interesting marketplace and community space for plugins, like plugins to do moderation, or plugins to play music, or play games, or do all the sorts of things that you might do with people in real life. What's cool is that they even provide a way for you to create an onboarding for your community to make it a little bit more personalized and create that intake experience for newcomers. Now, Twitch also came from an initial gaming use case, but it's since grown to cover all sorts of niche topics, niche skills, and it continues to thrive during the pandemic and post-pandemic. Now, Meetup, which brought us all here today, is primarily around meeting people in the real world and organizing those events. They made a quick pivot during the pandemic to handle virtual meetups. I think we had like 10 or 12 during the pandemic. But as things start to open back up more and more, I think products like Meetup are going to continue to see growth as people want to create that human connection again. And Patreon, which you might know of, is a membership platform for content creators to create their community and monetize what they're passionate about, whether it's art or some other skill set. And I think previously a lot of streamers or people displaying their skills on the internet, it was pretty top heavy with a lot of the top streamers making millions of dollars, but then it thinned out really quickly. And I think what's interesting about places like Patreon is that these people that have a passion for something that might be way more niche, that could be monetized mainstream, can now make a living off of that passion virtually. And YouTube introduced a new community tab separate from their videos and playlists where creators can engage directly with their audience. A project that we're working on in the office is called GeoJam. It's a consumer-facing mobile application, and it attempts to create a more meaningful level of engagement between musical artists and their fans. And fans can create community spaces, artists can create community spaces. There's an in-app cryptocurrency called Jam, and you're able to submit to competitions like submitting what you want the album art to be, or what you want their new single to be, when do you want it to drop, different competitions that they can have with their fans. So next we'll talk about biometrics. So these are biological measurements. They're used to identify individuals, things like fingerprint mapping, facial recognition. There's a lot of interesting advancements in this space to solve various design problems. During the pandemic, it was really difficult to open your phone from Face ID with your mask on, and Apple advanced their facial recognition to just handle, I believe, just the top portion of your face, like your eyes and the different features of your forehead, in order to unlock your phone without taking your mask off. Xiaomi has introduced hardware where you can just touch anywhere on the screen and it'll be able to unlock using your fingerprint. And we're seeing more use of facial recognition in airports. Star Alliance has introduced this program in Hamburg Airport, where you can go quickly through security and other steps in the travel process using facial recognition. So Innovatrix is doing some interesting things around what's called a liveness check. So it's trying to defeat fraud by scanning your image and checking it, making sure that you are a real person and that you are the person that you say you are. It's going to be difficult to try to get into a bar as a under 21-year-old in the future with a fake ID, that's for sure. So a less scary use case of this is iris guard. So they partnered with the UN, and they're able to scan the irises of refugees and verify their identity without unnecessary paperwork from their end. And this is a cool one that I've seen recently. It's called typing DNA. There was this crime show a few years ago where they solved it by studying the killer's handwriting. This is kind of like that, but the digital version. So it basically can understand the cadence of the keys that you click and the patterns around that, and it can verify your identity, probably better than a CAPTCHA. A project we're working on in this space is called Q for Sales. It's a product from Unifor, and it basically analyzes the faces of people on video calls, sales calls in particular, and using their algorithms, they're able to get a sense of customer reactions and emotions during that meeting. So using that, it's able to provide sentiment and engagement and track that over time and help sales professionals improve their service and get an understanding of their EQ, qualities like empathy, politeness, talk ratio, etc. So we're going to talk about device agnostic experience. So this is a simple one, basically creating a seamless experience across many devices and systems, having to think less about the connectivity between those systems. So products from a lot of the big players like Google and Apple, they're seeing their 10-year plus visions come to life where they built out these huge ecosystems of products that are really difficult to get out of. So, you're incentivized to continue to buy products from their suite because they make the connectivity between them so seamless, and you're able to manage them all from one place, like video cameras, the internal environment of your house, your entertainment, your navigation, things like that. Apple is doing the same thing, of course, and I think this ties back into our conversation around the metaverse, and what we're seeing products like Meta trying to do are create their own ecosystem for the metaverse where they can build and layer applications on top of it, create their own ecosystem for additional purchases within that. Netflix, another interesting and ubiquitous example, started off as just sending DVDs. Now I can stream it from any single device in my house. So it's difficult to kind of break in and sell products to consumers that aren't part of these home kits or Google Assistants, but we're seeing a lot of success on the periphery with products that can connect with their ecosystems, but are not a direct competitor. Things like smart lights that connect to the system and can create interesting effects based on what you're streaming on TV or on your computer, etc. And something I realized while putting this together was I'm wondering why Apple has never tried to make an actual television. So if that happens before next year, I'm going to say I told you so. All right, we're going to take a little pause here to talk about a few UI trends. My talks in the past have been more around these kinds of ideas, but tonight we're exploring the more broader trends as a whole. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is things that are made possible by advanced JavaScript or rendering technologies that allow us to do more interesting things with our UIs. So some people might have seen this example on the web. I like it because it shows off the technology of being able to move your cursor around on the screen, have the colors modified. It still indicates what the business does, but it's very engaging and you just want to explore it and hire these guys. And Samsung is doing some pretty cool things with their One UI. They've created multiple color palettes to allow you to customize it. So not just a light mode and a dark mode, but being able to specify these accent colors. They're still designing it in a way that it fits with their overall tone. It's matching their accessibility standards. So it's still somewhat of a controlled experience, but it allows you to personalize slightly. And then in the realm of marketing websites, we're still seeing things like asymmetrical layouts, things that break the typical mold, don't look like an enterprise product or website, in an effort to stand out in crowded markets. Then advancements in 3D rendering as well as internet speeds are going to allow products in e-commerce to give their users a more interesting experience and be able to inspect the products that they're going to build beforehand. So in this DJI example, you're able to pan around, orbit in 3D, check out this drone before you're purchasing. And I could see this becoming way more normal in the e-com experience, even for clothing that you might wear, or being able to pan around different shoes or outfits on an avatar, etc. And then with websites that have to tell a unique story, it can be a great strategy to implement these animation techniques that adjust on scroll, move down the page with you, just to help reinforce the messaging and make it an engaging experience, a less 2D experience. And then the next one was supersized text. So this is a project we worked on I think a little over a year ago at this point. But we're contrasting text sizes. We have this really bold, stylized fonts to help create these moments of impact and messaging, and then more dialed back body copy. And in some use cases, this can be quite powerful. Next trend is personalized experience. So these are experiences that use user data and input to curate a more customized experience. Sometimes they provide helpful tips and tools before the user asks for them. We've seen the e-commerce use case for a long time on sites like Amazon. They're basically taking your inputs, your browsing history, your purchasing history, and they're giving you these recommendations for other products you can buy. In social media, about every 3 posts, you're seeing a targeted ad around some product that they would like you to purchase. And that's also using your browsing history, because they're using products like Facebook and Instagram are using the pixel tracker to see what you're doing on the web and then suggest products that you might be interested in. And this is a huge part of their business model. Products like Spotify are not trying to sell you another product, but they're trying to continuously sell you on their product. So the way that they use personalization is to provide you with better playlists, better music, things based on your interests and playing history, and keep you coming back to the app and engaged and enjoying the music you're listening to. Now, some products like Care Of, a lot of products in the personal care space will utilize these short quizzes just to gain some information about you, learn more about your needs. They're very quick and simple, yes, no, a few multiple choice questions in there. And then they're going to provide you with product recommendations. Another example is Function of Beauty, which focuses on hair products. So they're getting to know a little bit about your hair. So they're collecting some data on you. And the incentive is that then they're going to show you a more isolated set of products that you can purchase. And this is essentially a twofold benefit. they're able to, command your attention because they're only giving you 4 or 5 products instead of their entire suite. So you're way more likely to purchase that because it's been customized for you. They're also getting the users to put in a little bit of work. And psychologically, when we put in a little bit of work, we're more invested in that product and more likely to purchase. NZXT is a PC building system. And what's interesting is that they'll give you the frame rate for each of the games that you like to play. So you'll know ahead of time that a certain build can handle the game that you want at the frame rate that you want, and they allow you to personalize that. So next we're going to talk about advanced onboarding. So all the designers here will know about the benefits of onboarding. It's a crucial part of the customer journey. You're able to showcase the product value. You're able to explain how to use the product. And a lot of users make up their minds at this point whether they can actually use it or not. So Slack uses their resting state to kind of introduce these little helpful tips and tricks to you. And what's nice is that they highlight the areas where you need to do the action, and then they will offer to teach you more if you want to, or dismiss it. The tone of voice that they use in the language is very conversational and approachable, and they make it really easy to turn off or continue. Grammarly is another interesting onboarding use case. What they do is let you preview their product. So you're able to open up a text file, see all the spelling and grammar mistakes, and then showcase how you can make those changes and how seamless their product is. So they're introducing the value of the product itself in a really controlled example. And they're also teaching you how to use their software. So there's 2 benefits. Notion is a project workspace and note-taking application for teams. Again, they're using a sample document here. This has a checklist component to it. And each of the checklist items teaches you how to do something different and introduces a new interaction of the system to you. So I thought that was a really fun way to introduce people to a product like note-taking. Avast, their business is related to online security and privacy. And in their onboarding, they just sort of jump right to it. They allow you to limit all trackers immediately, and they allow you to opt out of various advertisers right off the bat. And Reclaim AI is a calendar management application. They have an interesting walkthrough as part of their onboarding where they're displaying via animation how the calendar works. They're also asking you a few simple questions, a few simple inputs to get information about you and how they can make your experience better. Headspace has a really great onboarding. It's a very simple set of questions around your experience, what goals you have, and what time of day you want to meditate. It's very simple to complete. And I think with all these types of applications, whether it's the onboarding experience or the recommendations and personalization, there's a kind of social contract that we engage in with these products. And in order for them to really be successful in the future, where there's much more emphasis on privacy and lack of tracking, I think that we need to have these products only, like what we give the system, it has to be beneficial for the user. And if that sort of contract is broken and they're just taking your data and selling it, and it doesn't really improve your life in some way, then that's a contract we're likely to break. Next section is on digital trust. So here we're going to talk about data transparency and then ensuring security. So as we know, a lot of products are grabbing large quantities of user data and helping users understand how your product collects and uses their data really increase the trust that people have in your product. So this year, Apple dropped a huge bombshell around privacy. They've introduced the app tracking transparency, which allows users to basically disable tracking on all the apps that run on their iPhone and other devices. This has had a huge ripple effect on the companies that built themselves on top of Apple's infrastructure and don't control that ecosystem, like the Facebooks of the world. They've seen a huge drop off in their ability to target users based on their psychographics and actually serve them ads that they're likely to purchase the products that those ads are displaying. The update also creates this data report with a complete overview of each app's usage and the ability to control who has that private data. I mean, as users, this is a beautiful feature. It helps create a lot of peace of mind, but a lot of companies that have this business model of targeted advertising have really struggled since then. It's a really bold move from Apple because the App Store itself brings in a huge percentage of their revenue, and to just kind of like pull the rug out from these companies, it's going to require these companies going back to the drawing board and tweaking their business models, because I think the business model of targeted advertising and monetizing people's data is going to become more and more extinct. But as Apple has released this new app tracking feature and their focus on privacy, last year when I did the talk, I was like, oh, Apple's advertising is really big on privacy right now. And then this year they dropped this huge app tracking update. So it seems that this has been a few years in the making, but now we're seeing other products that might not be related to privacy and data sales, giving these messages like, we're not going to sell your customer data collected through our application, or we're never going to use the traditional trackers that many companies use. It's becoming more of a selling point for these products and a point of pride in trying to acquire users that might be skeptical of other competitors. PexIp is a video communication platform. They've also pledged to use user data only to improve their product offering. So that's a contract I'm willing to engage with. Further, they promise that their data will never be sold to third parties. And the design community is creating more and more education and instruction around how we should be designing for privacy and how we can give users the information they need and the opt-in cues they need in order to understand where their data is going to be shared and why. And the basic yet crucial way to gain trust is just make sure that the data is secure. So we're going to continue to see things like two-step authentication. This is a really common way of ensuring security of your application. Social logins. So these basically just take advantage of bigger companies that have more security protocols and allow their OAuth to do the work for you. And we've seen big businesses created around maintaining your password. I'm not sure that this style of business will continue to be a big thing in the future with a lot of different authentication methods coming out. I talked about them in the last Trends talk, but it seems like the password in general is slowly being phased out. But 1Password here gives you sort of a master security key that if you really want it to be secure, you would just write that down and not keep it anywhere else because it controls all your passwords. And you might think, oh, these password keepers, they never get hacked, right? But no, they do all the time. And there's actually a pretty interesting website that I can link to that shows all the times these have been hacked. But another password keeper, LastPass, they have a quite interesting feature where you can set up emergency contacts and timeframes where if my dad, for example, thought I was in an emergency, he could request access to my accounts. If I don't respond to him in 12 hours or to that request, it would immediately release my master password to him so that he could access my data or give me the help that I needed. And a very simple, but not used that often functionality would just be to allow users to disable devices that are running the software on it. Companies like Microsoft do this all the time in their products, but this is a very simple way to allow users to control their privacy. So I talked a little bit about right after the pandemic started, a lot of the focus was let's just get these things that we do in the real world onto the internet. Let's get them in the digital environment. But the one aspect of that with more and more staying power is enabling a hybrid workspace. So how do we work online and in more hybrid environments? So here we're relying a lot on integrations, plugins, internal communication tools, and other unique solutions. So Zoom, everyone knows Zoom. It became huge during the pandemic, but they've taken a lot of strides to build out their own app ecosystem and marketplace. So instead of just having video calls with colleagues and friends, they've introduced all of these various apps to enrich that experience and help people work and have fun. I'm using some examples that designers and developers would use. But in this case, we're looking at GitHub. They have lots of integrations with things like Slack, Jira, et cetera, to communicate between these different softwares that we use for work and keep everything up to date. Atlassian, the same thing. You can help streamline the workflow between design, tech, and other project management tools that you're using. Storybook.js is really interesting because it allows designers and developers to have a single repository or source of truth for the components in their applications. What I like about it is that you can basically see the exact UI interactions. So it takes it a little bit of a step further than just seeing that in Figma. And it also has the code associated with it. And Figma has built out many different integrations to allow for collaboration. We can get updates on comments and files in Slack, Notion, tie them to different tickets in Asana, etc. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but during the pandemic, it seemed like all the software I was using integrated voice, integrated chat into their product. We saw the huddle in Slack, we saw the conversation in Figma, and then the Google Workspace completely revised their side navigation to force you to always look at chat, spaces, and meet. I just thought it was interesting. Like these voice over IP products were big standalone businesses, and now all the tools we use have them incorporated. It's quite interesting, and it's done in an effort to kind of improve your collaboration with your teammates, and also kind of keep you in their application, in their ecosystem. All right, so we've reached the final trend here. It's a little bit more laid back. We're just going to talk about the year's top design tools. So we're always looking for different ways to improve how we work as designers, whether it's from brainstorming or design handoff to developers. The ones that streamline the entire process are seeing the most growth and the most adoption. That being Figma has basically taken over amongst all categories of design. From UI design, prototyping, design systems, versioning, and handoff in the UXtools.co survey that I always reference on these trends talks. It's taken the top spot across the board. Sketch is still somewhat relevant, and Adobe XD as well, but you'll see on the next slide they have much lower market share. So the first trends talk we gave, I think it was 2018. We had already completely shifted over to Figma in our office. We were kind of evangelists at the time, and we kind of predicted this trend, but we've really seen Figma take over in recent years. They're, I believe, a unicorn now. They're valued over $1 billion. They have a ton of resources at their disposal. Them introducing collaboration into their product really revolutionized how we design with one another and kind of left everyone else in the dust. We still see Adobe XD taking a decent market share, and this is not actually market share, but it's people who use that product as part of their workflow. So I think Illustrator and Photoshop probably not used too much for UI, UX design, but maybe designers use them for things like icons or graphics. What makes Figma great is their 5 values. So collaborative, being able to work with each other live in the same file. Borderless, so the same idea. You can work from anywhere in the world. You can even use it through the browser instead of the desktop application. They're transparent about their various app updates and features. I know when we previewed what they were going to release a few weeks ago, everyone in our office was really excited. So they generate a lot of hype around the unique features that they're going to come out with. They've also done a great job with the beta of their community. You see lots of plugins, widgets, different wireframe kits, icons, lots of examples of work from around the community that anyone can access with a subscription to Figma. So you can learn how other people put their components together. You can download resources to use in your projects, or you can purchase things, and you have plugins that help you do things that their developers have not built, but allow you to do unique things in the product. So the most popular tool for brainstorming, as opposed to FigJam, which is a Figma product, or Figma itself, is Miro, which is interesting. It's an online collaborative whiteboard. So they're not taking the approach that a lot of these other product suites like Adobe or InVision or Figma are taking. They're just trying to own the collaborative whiteboard and make that the best experience possible. And I think as opposed to getting into this war with the other design-centric product suites, they've really nicely carved out their own space. And for research tools, we see Zoom taking the top placement for user research, user testing for recruiting, and Notion, which is a really interesting product that a lot of you might use for the repository. We all know about Zoom, just gonna skip that one. User testing, so we're seeing a lot more user tests done remotely as opposed to in person, and that's enabled by products like usertesting.com. And for repository, Notion is this project workspace for teams, and make it really clean with their UI. It's really heavy on white space and emojis, and it just makes the experience of working more enjoyable. But I think this particular arena of repositories could face some competition by other applications like Coda and many more who are trying to solve similar problems. And that's all I got. Thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Testing. Okay. Are there any UI UX trends that you think will be short-lived?
On the spot, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Does anyone else?
Thank you. The interactive scrolling, does that ever cause any sort of issues for some people?
I think it can, depending on what device you're accessing it from, whether it's a tablet or your PC. I think, is there a specific use case of interactive scrolling that you're envisioning?
I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I've heard that certain kinds of motion that are unexpected or too fast.
Like accessibility?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could have an effect on that. And I think you want to not make them so drastic that they're jarring. The example I showed was a sped up GIF, so it likely looked a little bit more sketchy than in reality. But yeah, if just the sense of adding that animation in a subtle way can go a long way to make that page feel more rich and engaging. Other problems though with that are things like some people still like to print out websites, and if you have these animations that happen, that likely messes up printouts or just PDFs in general.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, we talked a lot about business and UI and tools. I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends in the accessibility space that are making waves or doing anything differently.
Yeah, we did a talk pretty recently on accessibility. We can send around the link afterwards. I'm not sure of anything off the top of my head around accessibility, but perhaps Chris can answer that as he's a little more versed. Or we can just share the link.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that talk, we were looking beyond issues of color contrast. So often the kind of quick thing you call out in some sort of heuristic audit is that the color contrast of this body copy is incongruent with the background. You know, we're looking for either a 3:1 or a 4.5:1 ratio. So in that talk, it got into, and yes, best we probably circulated, but issues around other types of accessibility, around anxiety, what it means to actually have a workflow that actually is anxiety inducing, and what if your audience is of that nature, and things like that. Also screen readers. Some of these things get more into actual composition of the front end code. What are the focus states? Are they defined? Is there alt text? So some of it's like kind of beyond UI. But I think it was interesting because that one, like the quick flippant answer is color, but there's so much more than that.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people are just thinking about like visual impairment when we talk about designing for accessibility on the web. But the talk that we got into more of the other senses that it impacts in various solutions.
Yeah, I have a question. It's not really specific to the talk that you gave, but this is the first event that I've come to in the city, like since COVID life, and I'm just wondering, like, are you enforcing all your employees to come to the office? Because I know it's a controversial topic, and if there's any benefits of actually having all your employees in the same room, or does remote work solve whatever you want to do?
That's a good question. We are all remote distributed, but we still maintain a small office here for people who want to come in and work in person and who live in the city. For this event, we flew in a few of our other designers from around the US and Canada. So it's nice to meet up in person once in a while, but yeah, we made that hard decision, I believe like a year and a half ago, to just completely go distributed. That's sort of the way of the future. And I think it has some impact on productivity and collaboration. Well, not necessarily productivity, but collaboration if your organization's not set up for it. But for us, like we did have some remote people already. We were already using Slack, Zoom, Figma as a design agency. It's more like replicating the cultural components of being in person virtually. That was still a learning experience for us, but I feel like we've done a pretty good job.
Hi. So this is a question on consumer apps, since you're talking about design trends. What are your thoughts on something like Starbucks Summer Game? Have you seen that? Like they have a bunch of series of tasks that the user has to complete. Do you see more and more apps adopting something like this?
Is that like a scavenger hunt kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
So they give you these tasks like, why don't you try non-dairy products, or why don't you go and redeem 3 stars and whatnot.
That sounds pretty interesting. I haven't seen that personally. And actually, after Pokemon Go came out, I thought we were going to see a ton more experiences like that. I've seen a lot of conceptual products or projects around like travel and maybe collecting the different landmarks of a city and introducing some semblance of augmented reality into that experience. But I haven't used too many examples of that or actually downloaded applications that do that. I haven't seen a ton of interesting use cases released to market around that idea. So, but I'll definitely check out the Starbucks one. Sounds like an interesting way to engage people in a different way.
Anyone else?
Hi, my question is about sound design. So with Figma, I think incorporating sound is still a challenge. Those the favorite sort of design app, and Adobe XD allows that. Could you talk a little bit about probably designing for Echo or Alexa and devices like that?
Yeah, we haven't done too much design in that realm. We've done some talks with, I believe, a company that produces chatbot technology and allows you to customize what your what that experience or conversation is going to be. But we haven't done a lot of work around voice. It's interesting. I actually didn't know that XD allowed you to implement sound. I think that's something that Figma should release, because as designers, we're often just thinking about the visual experience, and we forget, like, if we're talking about gaming, like, sound design is so important. And a lot of the products that are coming out and are going to be coming out in the future are really sort of driven in that underpinning of the gaming world, right? Things are becoming much more engaging aspects of gamification. I'm not surprised by that either, because millennials now, we're the ones designing and building the software, and we've been gaming since our youth with the first and second gen consoles, and now gaming is just such a huge industry with the advanced internet speeds that we have now in rendering. It's just going to continue to have impact on the other products that we're using, making them more fun, right?
So I mainly am curious how Neuron keeps up with all of these UI UX trends. Is it mainly just like, oh, we ran into this and we're just gonna write it down type of thing? Because that's honestly what I do.
I mean, we try to share the interesting things that we find amongst our group in a Slack channel or in different calls. I don't really keep notes like that I come back to at the end of the year. It's more so like I've agreed to put on this trends talk, and now I go dig back into all my stuff. I do my research. I try to connect the dots and come up with some interesting opinions on that. But we do keep our finger on the pulse of trends that are changing. And in our industry, it's happening so frequently, right? Like, you couldn't even watch videos on Facebook less than 10 years ago. So there's a lot of new things that we have to accommodate constantly.
Hey. So you mentioned in the passwords section of the conversation that you think passwords are probably not going to be around for too much longer. I'm just curious what some of the replacements are that you could see happening.
Yeah, when we talked about it in the past, we were seeing things like the magic link, right? So just instantly sending you an email that allows you that access. We've seen that successfully done with products like Medium for blogging. We've seen some other styles of authenticators, but I think they're the ones that I've seen are more similar to that magic link, where it's providing you more instantaneous access as opposed to requiring you to. It can be a ton of friction for users. They often forget their passwords, and they have to reset the password, and they have to go to their email, and they have to click the link. It's an arduous process. There's lots of interesting solutions coming out. I'm blanking on most of them except for Magic Link right now.
I think we have a bit more time if anyone has any questions. If not, happy to wrap enough pizza. Any thoughts?
Sounds good.
Favorite trend of anyone? Well, I think we deserve Matt another big round of applause. Thank you. Also, a special shout out to our colleague Jeremy, who's over there. He definitely helped with all those cool animations and the jokes you saw. It really was a collaborative effort at Neuron this year.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And yeah, Matt's humble about it, but yeah, that's the fun thing about being a design studio like Neuron. We are just designers, there are no developers. So these things pique our interest. We have weekly Friday teardowns and things come up, and it really was a collaborative effort putting this together. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, thank you for taking notes, those who did, but importantly, into the live stream there, Matt will be doing a voiceover after this, which will be a nice artifact going forwards. If this is your first time at Beer and UX, which I've heard from a couple of you it is, welcome. Probably for the foreseeable future, they'll be virtual, which might be easier depending where you live. And to those of our visitors from Switzerland, I don't know how you say welcome in Swiss German, but welcome. Yes, but again, Beer and UX is a production of Neuron, a San Francisco-based design agency, and I hope you all have a great night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Legal?
I think it's done. No. Oh no, now ends.